Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Armchair Booking Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host. My name is Stunning Steve Barber. And those of you watching on YouTube already noticed that I'm the only person here right now. That is because my co-host, my normal co-host, Delicious Dwaylon Davis, the intellectual rock star, he is actually going to be taking a hiatus for a bit. That was actually, part of the reason why we decided to take a break in December, because for one, around the holidays, around Christmas time, and anything else that you may celebrate, we do realize that a lot of time and attention are going to be focused on family. And so we decided to kind of take a break from that. And, Dwaylon has some family stuff going on. I'm pretty sure those who actually know Dwaylon and those who actually keep up with the podcast, they know, for one thing, his wife is pregnant. And so he's had to devote a lot of time to making sure she's taken care of, and not only that, but taking care of a lot of other family things. So he will rejoin the show whenever he feels he is ready. In the meantime, just definitely be thinking about him, definitely be praying about him, because uh, he's a family man and he's definitely taking care of his family. So and we can't fault that, because one of the things about this show that Joel and I have always said is family does come first. And but he gave me the blessing, go ahead and do it solo if you need to. And he said, whenever I'm able to join, he will. So for now, I'll be running solo with the occasional guest co-host, because I've actually done that before. When Dwayne took a vacation last year, I actually did have a couple of people step in, while he was gone, and they actually co-hosted the show. So the show will go on, uh, but it just means that I have to do things a little bit different for right now. And one of the things that Dwayne and I had actually talked about doing different, and obviously we haven't started this yet, is we were really seriously kicking around the idea of going live. And I'm talking live, like doing a live stream where people would be able to comment and make real-time comments, whether it be through YouTube, through Facebook, through Twitter, what have you. And that is a very real possibility that could still happen. But right now, with me running solo, I'm having to kind of rethink how I'm doing things a little bit. But stay tuned for that. And this is actually the first episode of the year. That's one of the things I wanted to go ahead and get out. Something that we are 4 days into 2024. 2023 obviously is now over. And wow, it was a very interesting year for the show. And, for both Dwaylon and I in our personal lives. And for me, and was a year ago right now, Dwaylon and I, we both had full-time jobs. And about 6 months into the year, neither one of us had a full-time job. And the circumstances were different. But so we've been having to do other things, and but we've always managed to keep the show going as much as what we can, or as much as what we could. And so for us to say, okay, for Dwaylon to take a hiatus, that tells you, I mean, he's really having to focus on family, and which is that's just the person Dwaylon is, and I absolutely respect him for it, and because I'd be doing the same thing. Family will always come first. But some of the things that have happened for the show in 2023, as far as like wrestling goes, and I mean, I could give a like kind of a rehash of everything that's happened in the world of wrestling, because we know there were some pretty big news stories that came out. Um, the last part of the year actually was a little boring. That was actually another reason we just are like, we don't even know what we want to talk about, because he and I both were um kind of putting our priorities on, hey, it's Christmas. Hey, let's make sure our wives are taken care of, because my wife had her own issues going on when she had some foot surgery, and so she couldn't do anything for a couple months. She couldn't even drive herself, so I was taking care of that. But as far as like wrestling goes, um, I don't know the biggest thing for me because I actually had a few things going on. I went to a couple of different fan fests, both of them in Chillicothe, Ohio. Both of them put on by Bobby Fulton and or Jimmy Hines as his actual name, uh, but but went to those fan fests. I was able to actually meet quite a few wrestlers. Some of the most memorable interactions for me was Nikita Koloff. That was the first one to stand out in my mind. If you've actually listened to the show from the past, you know what I'm talking about. But it was a one of the most kind of surreal experiences ever with Nikita. And um, next to that is actually Bill Apter. Bill Apter he actually cut a promo for the show, and I joked with Dwaylon afterwards, and I said we're gonna have to change the name of the show, and he said, "Why is that?" I said because Bill Apter just named us the Armchair Podcast. Didn't have the word booking, and like Dwaylon said, he said, "Well, if Bill Apter said that's the name, then I guess we're gonna have to change the name." Now, obviously, we haven't. It's a big joke, but it was just one of those kind of moments, just meeting Bill Apter and his one-time price, because when you go to a fan fest, you're going to pay to meet the wrestlers, or the some of them aren't necessarily wrestlers. I mean, some of them are managers, but they're people, wrestling personalities. Because Bill Apter was never a wrestler. Bill Apter was known for being part of what some of the best-selling wrestling magazines, also known as, they actually called the magazines the Apter Mags after him, even though he actually was not the one in charge. And that actually you would have thought that I would have known that, but I didn't. But uh for I think it was $25, I got autographed pictures, a couple autographed pictures he autographed to me and my son, and his book, which he also autographed to both of us, and got to take pictures with him. And then he actually had the idea of doing the promo for the podcast. That was one of the coolest things. And at that same event, I actually met Jimmy Valiant, the Boogie Woogie Man. He was my favorite wrestler when I was a kid, when I first started watching wrestling. I actually got to meet him. He actually autographed his figure, which you can kind of see back behind my right shoulder. And he autographed that. And naturally, next to his booth was Dan Severn, the Beast. See the belt back in the back? Not the one on the top, but the one on the next level down. That's the old NWA World Championship. That's the 10 pounds of gold, the big gold dome, whatever you want to call it. And Dan Severn actually autographed that, because Dan Severn is actually a former NWA World Champion, and that's the belt that he held. And so some of the other the other fan fest that I went to, same place. It was just 6 months later. Got to meet um Ted DiBiase and Mike Rotunda, also known as IRS. This was about 2 weeks after Mike Rotunda's son, Bray Wyatt, real name Wyndham Rotunda. It was about 2 weeks after he passed away. So I imagine it was really hard for him to be there. And but he came, and I actually, when I got them to autograph this set of Funko Pops right there, which is actually Money Incorporated, which is the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, and of course Mike Rotunda, IRS. They actually both autographed that. And yeah, it's just been, for a wrestling fan, going to these fan fests. It actually is one of the coolest experiences, because you do get to meet and interact with some of the wrestlers who you may have grown up watching, and that is one of the coolest things ever to me. Also, one of the people who I met there, and we set up an interview with him, which happened just a few weeks later, was the living legend Larry Zbyszko. And as far as all the guests, which we had a lot of guests in the show this year, as far as all the guests go, he's got to be the top, near the top, or even at the top, is one of the most famous ones we've ever met. One of the coolest experiences we've ever had on the show. And he was just fantastic to talk to. He could have stories for days. But I mean, of course, we had to limit the time that we had with them because if not, we would have a 4 hour long podcast at the very least. And, which kind of defeats the purpose if you want people to listen to it. But I mean, we still spent over an hour with him. I mean, it was a great time. He was funny and talking about it, his kids and his grandkids and his time with Bruno and, one of, how he was the most hated wrestler of the year in 1980, which I know sounds like a weird accolade, but it actually is a pretty nice one because it means people are definitely watching you. You're getting the reaction that you want. And he was also match of the year for 1980, along with Bruno. But we also had the return of Wildcat Chris Harris to our show. As you can see, he's got his own action figure right behind me. Because I always tell anybody who's part of the Northern Wrestling Federation, I always tell them when they come on the show, hey, Wildcat's watching. And those of you who are audio only, you don't see, but it's actually right behind my right shoulder. It's actually almost underneath the 10 mounds of gold. But with Wildcat returning to the show, I mean, that was such a fun time because I see him every time I go to a Northern Wrestling Federation or NWF show. And he's always been such a nice guy to talk to. And we're definitely going to have him back on the show again because it's always a fun time when he comes on. But some of the other wrestlers we've had a lot of NWF wrestlers on the show. And, part of that's just because, I mean, I live real close to Cincinnati and we have the, we have all the shows that I go to and not just the NWF, but also another company called Spot Monkey Promotions, where I've been able to go a couple of their shows and got to meet even more. I met Jimmy Hart again. And he actually this time they were selling megaphones, which I can't find my megaphone right now, which sounds really weird, but I actually ended up buying a pink megaphone and then he drew hearts on it and he autographed it. And if you know anything about the Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart, that's actually a pretty cool souvenir. But got to meet him and got to meet the current NWA World Champion, EC3. He was actually at one of those shows and one of the Spot Monkey shows. And he actually on that show defended his title against Lord Crew. Now I've been trying to get Lord Crew in the show. Lord Crew is actually a very, very busy man, and he is like right there. It's not a matter of if he's going to make it to one of the bigger companies; it's a matter of when. And I've heard a lot of his peers say the same thing because they're like Crew is he is right there. He is probably more than ready. But had return of Noah Gabriel. Noah Gabriel with a new attitude, and then Noah decided he was going to snot on my shirt on the Armchair Booking uh, T-shirt. And so we've had some words since then because he blew his nose in my shirt. Noah's no longer the nice guy that he used to be. But also, I had the return of Riley Matthews. And because the first time she was on the show, she had been in the wrestling business about a month. And she was, still brand new. And it was actually the shortest interview I've ever done. This time when she came back, it actually, the interview went from 15 minutes to about an hour and a half, maybe. I'd have to look, but another good time because Riley she's doing fantastic. And if you haven't seen her wrestle, I mean, you understand how she got the PGWA Professional Girls Wrestling Association Rookie of the Year. And, for her first year wrestling, she earned that award. She's been putting on great matches and she's wrestling all over the place. I mean, not just in Cincinnati, but I mean, she's wrestling in parts of Indiana. She's going down to Louisville and wrestling for OVW. She's doing shows for them. She's also going out to West Virginia and doing some shows. She's going to Texas. She's going to Canada. She's just doing great. And some of the other ones, our most recent guest we had on was the actual NWF World Champion, or their heavyweight champion, Pompano Joe, and a man with a lot of experience. And he had we could have talked to him forever because he has a lot of stories that he could tell. Yeah, but we've been so fortunate to have people like that. But not only that, but at the beginning of the year, we started a series called Why We Are Fans. Now, I could sit there and rattle through all the people we had on for that one, but I would actually probably run out of, I'd probably forget some names because we actually had quite a few. But some of the ones I had on was like my friend Dwaylon and our friend Randy. He was actually our first guest for that. Randy also stood in as co-host for a show while Dwaylon was away, when he went on his vacation. But we also had Justin from the TNC Sports Talk. He also stood in while Dwaylon was vacationing down in Florida. Justin came on, but he also did the Why We Are Fans. We also had BC Hunter from Wrestling with the Truth, Wrestling with the War, Wrestling with the 80s. If you haven't had a chance to check out those shows, do it. BC does an absolute fantastic job, and I highly recommend his show. His viewer count, especially on YouTube, is growing. I think he's getting pretty close to 1,000 subscribers now, which is awesome. And I've even said, man, won't you send some of those my way? Yeah, sure could use them, but but he's definitely earned those subscribers, because I mean he really does do a fantastic job of that. You got to check him out because he's an old school fan, just like Dwaylon and myself. Also, Ted the Hillbilly Hill came on, discuss why he's a fan. Ted it's no longer called the Hill Truth, and that's one of the things that it actually caught me off guard, because his is one of the podcasts that I listen to, and I looked up and I did not recognize the thumbnail. And said, okay, what's this show? It looks like I'm subscribed to it. What is this show? Ted's actually renamed it Ted's Takes on Wrestling. And the show is still the same. It is still one of the best wrestling podcasts out there. Ted's still the podfather. And you got to go check him out. But also some of our other friends from the Dad World Order. Also our friends from Finisher Wrestling. They've all been on the show. And also some non-wrestling podcasters like Jamie and John from True Crime Cast / Bless Their Hearts. They were on the show also to discuss their fandom and how they were able to start a relationship basically with Chris Jericho. Now they're friends with Chris Jericho now. They've actually been on his podcast at least 3 times. I'm thinking actually maybe 4 or 5, but he was also on their show. And Jamie especially was actually talking about how he was about to hyperventilate, just thinking about Chris Jericho coming on their show, because he was such a huge fan of Jericho back in the day. And now here he was coming on his show, and on their true crime show, by the way, because Jericho, I don't know if a lot of people know this, one of Jericho's I don't know if you call him a real good friend, but it was definitely an acquaintance. Definitely somebody they ran in the same circles with, ended up becoming a serial killer later on. And Jamie and John, of course, they have a true crime podcast called True Crime Cast. And they actually reached out to talk to him about, hey, would you be okay with discussing our show? And he responded back, and next thing you know, got our rolling. It was actually Chris Jericho's podcast how I found their podcast, their True Crime podcast, which led me to finding their Bless Their Hearts podcast, which I've actually been on, and now they've been on this podcast, if that makes any sense. But also our friend, mine and my wife's friend, Carrie, it's actually my wife's friend first, but I mean, I've become friends with her, obviously, over the years. And we had Bear from the Wrestling Society Network, and it has just been so many people. In fact, a man named Jake Petway, who actually makes his own guitars, and one of his guitars he actually made for Elias. And actually, Elias is now going by the name Elijah, and he is no longer in WWE, and he's actually become a born again Christian. And I'm thinking his character is something related to that. But I'm actually looking at the list of some of the people had Kyle, the former co-host. Kyle was on here. He was one of the people why we were fans. We always have a pretty good time talking to Kyle, and I'll be doing some more stuff with Kyle, not wrestling related necessarily, but just because he and I have known each other for a very long time, a little over 25 years now, and because he we go back to our days when we worked together, when he and I both were in the Air Force. But we had Big Mama return. We had Breezy return. We had the first interview with Savannah Sweet. We also had Jack Stinger, who real first name is Jackie, but Jackie is actually a captain in the Army. She's actually active duty. She's an active duty soldier. and that was a first for us. We also had Star Rider, our very first masked wrestler. And, and then a couple weeks after we had Larry Zbyszko, of course, Larry Zbyszko is a former NWA TV champion. We had the current NWA TV champion, Matthew Big Strong Mims, who's not his first time on the show, but it's his first time as a TV champion. We had him come on back onto the show, and we had a great time talking to him. He's one of the most intelligent people you ever talk to, and I've always told Dwaylon that anytime I talk to Mims, I said I feel dumber, and not because he's dumb at all, because I don't know a lot of the words that he's actually saying, because he has such a vast vocabulary, and apparently around the locker room they actually call him the walking thesaurus. And if you ever talk to him, you understand why. Dude was just awesome to have on the show, and it made me go find the thesaurus to go look up some of the words he was using. But yeah, he was great. We actually had him on the show right before they were doing their show in Cleveland, because he was actually in Cleveland when he did the interview with us. Because the NWA, of course, they are branching out. They're trying to return it, and I know this is going to be tough. It's going to be an uphill battle, but I mean, it's not impossible. They're trying to return back to a territory type system with the NWA. And that's why, if you notice, if you keep up with wrestling, they are establishing partnerships with a lot of more local companies. I don't know, it slightly higher than like an indie. They've been doing some stuff with OVW. I think OVW, Ohio Valley Wrestling out of Louisville, because of the Netflix documentary series called The Wrestlers, or just Wrestlers. OVW has now become probably the most well-known independent wrestling company in the country. And if you have not seen that show, go check it out. It is absolutely great. I've watched it. Our friends at the Dad World Order podcast, they actually had Al Snow on their show not long after the show, the documentary actually debuted on Netflix. They actually were very fortunate to have Al Snow on their show, and definitely go check that one out. And I actually had a couple of questions that, and they actually passed them along to Al Snow, and he actually answered them, and that was actually really, really cool. But that was 2023, and some of the other news that came out of that, stuff that's still kind of ongoing, is, of course, WWE is now owned by the company called Endeavor. Endeavor also owns UFC. That means the WWE stock symbol actually changed. There is no more WWE stock. It now falls under the name of TKO. And along with Endeavor, a lot of changes started coming about. Vince McMahon is no longer doing, well, pretty much anything with WWE. Triple H, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, real name Paul Levesque, he's actually doing a lot of the majority of the creative. And if you watch Raw and SmackDown, you will notice there is a change to those, the way the production's been going on. But also within the past couple of weeks, it came out that longtime television producer for WWE, Kevin Dunn, is now no longer with WWE. Now, I don't know the man personally. I just want to put that out there. But it does seem like the opinions on Kevin Dunn are very, very divided. Because some people are like, well, look at the show he did for so long, and they had to be successful somehow. But I'll counter with this: for a very long time, they didn't have any competition. So if you were a wrestling fan, that's what you watched. And he has caught a lot of criticism for the way the shows were produced. I mean, people mean the jump camera and the shaky camera, and plus the quick cuts that they would have when he was cutting from camera to camera, and it was actually kind of hard and kind of frustrating to kind of keep track of that. But I even noticed on like the latest episode of SmackDown, the day one, because this past Monday, of course, I say SmackDown, I meant Raw. It was on New Year's Day, 1st of January. And so it was the day one show. They've been doing like a day one episodes or day one pay-per-view or just day one special over the past few years. And this one was just an episode of Raw, which was a little bit beefed up, and um, but it was called Day One. You could definitely tell a difference because one of the things about this particular episode was they actually started out with a match. They didn't start out with a 20-minute, 25-minute promo for a match, which, by the way, by the time the first match would have actually started, the TV show is already going. A sixth of the TV show is already over. It's a 3-hour show. You just spent the first 30 minutes doing a skit. Well, they didn't do that, thankfully. They're bringing wrestling back to the wrestling shows, and Kevin Dunn is no longer part of that. So hopefully you won't see what they call the shaky camera, the jump camera, because I've actually been to Raw and SmackDown in the past, like live shows. I was actually in Columbus the night Big Show and Braun Strowman actually broke the ring. I was there that night, but I can tell you by watching, if you were to watch the cameramen, the camera operators down by the ring, whenever like a body slam or kind of a high impact move would happen, you would see the person holding the camera jump it. They would actually jump it up and bring it back down. It's kind of like something like, your uncle with the camcorder would do, because they think they think they're making like an award-winning documentary, but they always go, "Oh, earthquake," and they start shaking the camera. That's what it was like. And so I did see, yeah, they were literally shaking the camera. They were jumping the camera to make it look like the move had even more impact. And I'm like, no, it just made people sick at home. They got tired of watching it like that. But Kevin Dunn is no longer with WWE. Big news that just came out of Raw this past Monday. Of course, we saw the return of they were advertising the return of a former WWE champion, and out comes Jinder Mahal, and the crowd started booing. Jinder Mahal took it all in stride because he's self-aware. He knows that he's not the most popular person. I actually am a fan of Jinder Mahal, and Dwaylon's also a fan of Jinder Mahal. We say, I mean, you know what? He's got a look. I mean, you look at the dude, he is just jacked. He can give a good promo. He can make the crowd hate him. I think some of the crowd just hates him just because he can be kind of obnoxious. His move set is actually pretty good. He's a decent wrestler, but for some reason, he's maybe because he's not as exciting as some of the other ones. But the fans are booing him, and he's running the fans down. He's running the country down. And then you hear across the loudspeaker, across the intercom, if you smell what the Rock, it's indicated, guess what? The Rock has returned, in this case, to San Diego. Well, the Rock came out, of course, crowd's going nuts. The pop was just huge. And he comes back and he's running down Jinder Mahal. And of course, the Rock's promos are like second to none. The Rock is one of the people you don't script out anything for him. I don't even know if you give him bullet points, but you just say, "Here, have a microphone, do your thing." And he ran down Jinder Mahal, and the Rock, in his own way, I mean, just had the crowd eating at the palm of his hand. And then he ends up smacking Jinder Mahal around, and he lays the people's elbow on him, which, if you've listened to the show long enough or watched the show long enough, Dwaylon and I are not fans necessarily of the people's elbow as far as like a devastating move. It is one of the goofiest moves in the entire history of sports entertainment, but it gets over. Now, I mean, his rock bottom, I mean, is legit. The rock bottom, I mean, you could actually do that maybe like in a real fight, and you could put a hurting on somebody. But the people's elbow, no, it's an elbow drop. And he actually did his version of the spine buster, and his spine buster, I'm like, I've never been like a fan of the way he does it. But the man's just over. And the Rock, I mean, he looked like he's never like had a day not in the gym. I mean, that dude, he is just jacked. He's cut. He's definitely taking care of himself. And you got to think he's in his 50s. He's actually a year or two older than I am. And I just turned 50 this past August. The Rock is at least 51 or 52. And he just looks phenomenal. But he came back did his thing, and then he started asking San Diego, where should I go eat afterwards? Wait a minute, should I go to a restaurant? Okay, when I go to a restaurant, where should I sit? At a booth? At the table? And then he said, at the head of the table. And of course, the crowd popped because there have been rumors going around for a few years that The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, he's going to come back and challenge Roman Reigns. And part of that is challenging Roman Reigns, not just for the title, but for the championship belts, but for the title of head of the table, because that is a real thing in Samoan culture. A lot of people don't realize that. And by the way, people on YouTube notice I'm actually wearing a shirt with the bloodline, and obviously just before the twins Jay and Jimmy, it kind of split apart before Jay actually uh, broke apart from the bloodline. And by the way, I got this shirt from Rikishi at one of the fan fests. It was part of the package whenever you got to meet him. But people want The Rock to come back. The head of the table is, I mean, it is a very real thing. He's that being the tribal chief, and so for The Rock now we kind of see where this is heading to, because The Rock is actually the highest paid person in Hollywood right now. That is not a storyline thing. That is a real thing. Dwayne Johnson, and through his company, $7 or $7 entertainment, $7 entertainment. There's a story behind the name, uh, but he actually is the highest paid entertainer right now in Hollywood. And it would kind of make sense for now. They're gonna push, have these promo leading up into WrestleMania. WrestleMania is not happening until what, April? Late March, early April. That's usually when it happens. And actually, it's April because a lot of times it actually happens the same weekend as the Final Four in the NCAA men's basketball tournament. But he's back, so now we know that what they're going to be leaning towards is The Rock and Roman Reigns having a battle at WrestleMania for the title, not just the belts, but hopefully. I'd rather Roman not have the belts because, to be honest with you, I don't want to see or The Rock holding the title again, because he wrestles once every 3 years or so now, and to come back and put a world title on him, to me that's just not right. Um, but The Rock is back. Also, the Royal Rumble is coming up in a little over 3 weeks. We already have two people who are signed up for the Rumble. CM Punk, which, by the way, a lot of news about CM Punk in 2023. I'm not a fan. Most people know that. I am not a fan of CM Punk. And it's not because of the wrestling. It's because of the baggage that comes with it. I'm going to give him his chance, give him his due, because he's basically saying he's a changed man. He's not the immature person that he was 9 years ago when he left. Actually, almost 10 years ago now, when he actually left WWE, kind of fitting his last match with WWE before he just made his return a few weeks ago was actually at the Royal Rumble in 2014. But now he's back. He's saying, basically, he feels like he's home. But of course, this is after he left. He walked out. He no-showed. He did a couple of appearances with UFC, ironically enough, where he has a record of I believe it's 0 wins and 2 losses. And his first match in UFC, he lasted about a minute and a half, and it was done. But now he's back. We'll have to see how it goes, because, I mean, I do believe, yeah, everybody can get a second chance. But when he went to AEW, and then a year and a half later, he's out of AEW because he got into like actual physical fist fights with people backstage. He went on press conferences and ran the company down, and he ran the owners down, and he ran the leadership down during an actual real press conference, which is not something you do. That was not part of a storyline. That was just him being Phil Brooks, just thinking I can just do and say what I want. And it seems to me like he doesn't understand. No, you can't just go in there, because there's a lot of things when you're representing a company that you just don't do. And Then he got into another fight, and this was actually at their pay-per-view in London. He got in a fight with Jungle Boy Jack Perry, and a lot of fallout from that, which in this case meant he was basically let go out of his contract. He was fired or he quit. Depending on who you ask, it was a mutual agreement that he should no longer be with All Elite Wrestling. Now, he's part of WWE, where it looks like some wrestlers are not happy to see him back. Most of all, Seth Rollins. If you saw the reaction at the Survivor Series pay-per-view, whenever CM Punk's music hit at the very end, now they've had fan videos. This was not on WWE's website. This was on YouTube and other video outlets. You can actually find the fan videos where people who were there, they were filming, they're recording Seth Rollins, and he was dropping some language and he was throwing up um, some gestures that are not exactly family friendly and something they would not show in WWE TV. And then it's come out that he and Punk just do not like each other. And well, Rollins and Cody Rhodes apparently don't like each other either, but they keep it professional enough to go in the ring. Also, Seth Rollins, he had some issues with Matt Riddle. It seems like, you have someone like Seth Rollins who seems to be bumping heads with people. Then you have CM Punk who bumps heads with people. So it almost seems natural. They're either going to bump heads or they're going to be tag team partners. There's like no in between there. It's going to be one or the other. And, Punk and Rollins, they've been throwing some jabs at each other in promos. And I know this makes it appear like, well, maybe it's a work. There's the gray area. And that actually keeps us coming back to watch it just to see, okay, what's going to happen next. And some of the best storylines are the ones taking off real life stuff. But also on the flip side, some of the worst storylines were things taking off real life stuff. Hence, let's see, Road Warrior Hawk when he was going through drug problems, Scott Hall when he was going through his alcohol problems, Matt Hardy and Edge when the whole drama when Lita was cheating with Edge. She was cheating on Matt Hardy with Edge, like in real life, and they decided to make it part of a story. Just things like that. But we'll have to see how it goes with CM Punk, and we'll have to see how it goes with Seth Rollins. Right now, a lot of speculation is, okay, who is going to be, and not just in the Royal Rumble, because you can say both Cody and CM Punk, or I'd say Cody more than CM Punk as far as who's deserving of a world title shot at WrestleMania. But we'll have to see how it goes. Obviously Seth Rollins being, one, I've kind of lost track of all the different titles they have because they added another title just for Seth Rollins because Roman Reigns is the undisputed champion. And so they said, okay, we'll have a world champion. That'd be Seth Rollins. So, wait a minute. So you just basically create a title out of thin air just because you have too many titles over here all put on one person? Doesn't make any sense to me, but whatever. I'm not the one writing the checks. But so Royal Rumble's coming up and AEW, like I mentioned. Now, there have been speculation about AEW, what's going to come with them, because they do seem like right now, from the outside, they seem like a sinking ship. And came out, well, even for Dynamite, even for Rampage, even for their shows, which are on TV, the arenas are only half full. And they're packing all the fans on one side. And then I went to a Dynamite in Cincinnati. And honestly, I can tell you that the arena was half full and everybody was shoved on one side. And it was obviously the side I was on. But one good thing came out about that day, and that was I was on TV wearing my Armchair Booking t-shirt. I really was. And because I actually watched it when John Moxley, of course, John Moxley being from Cincinnati, I mean, he got a huge pop. He came out very first match, and he actually came up into the crowd, and it was when they were filming him. He was about 10 feet in front of me, and so when the camera got it, you could actually see me. You could see me. You could see my wife's head just because, she's short. And so you can barely see her head over somebody's shoulder. You couldn't see my son at all. He didn't want to be on TV anyway, but that was actually really cool. But yeah, the AEW crowds, they have been, um, I don't want to say anemic, because I think that would be, um, kind of exaggerating it. But yeah, the place was only half full. And because I actually have pictures of it. Now, I wasn't going to post them on social media like a lot of other people doing. Hey, look at this AEW. I'm like, well, you still paid for the ticket. You paid for a ticket just to go show and, go take pictures on the other side of the arena. You bought a ticket to a company that you are acting like you don't like. No, I bought a ticket because I wanted to watch wrestling. That's what I did. I watched wrestling. One of the things that also came about that particular night was during the Rampage taping. Of course, Dynamite is live. Rampage is taped immediately after Dynamite. And Jade Cargill came out, and this was actually her last match with AEW. And I actually got to watch that live. I'm like, well, that's pretty cool. And, so in AEW here recently, they actually had a storyline where they had a character they were just calling the Devil. Well, the Devil was finally revealed this past Saturday. I believe it was Saturday. It turns out it was Adam Cole. I don't particularly know what to think about that. Me personally, if I was having some unknown character and I'm just going to do the big reveal, personally, I would have had it be someone who is not part of the roster at the time, especially not somebody with as high visibility as Adam Cole, or Adam Cole, baby. But that's just me. But one of the other cool things that came out was Samoa Joe is now the AEW champion. He beat MJF. Now, I saw somebody post this not too long ago, right after this. Samoa Joe has now been the world title holder. He's been the champion of every company he's ever been in. How many people can say that? Not many. And I don't even think Ric Flair can say that. And Ric Flair held the NWA, WCW, WWF world title, but Ric Flair started in somewhere like an AWA where he was never champion. And Samoa Joe, and Ric Flair is also in TNA. He was never champion there. Samoa Joe has been champion, and he's been a world heavyweight champion in WWE, TNA, Ring of Honor, and now AEW. So everywhere he goes, he gets not just gold, but he gets the gold. But as people are going back and forth between the companies, Andrade, Elidalo actually left AEW. I would guess he's probably on his way back to WWE, and part of that is because, well, his wife is actually in the WWE roster, Charlotte Flair, and there have been rumors that they've been separated, but from what I'm seeing now, I'm guessing that no, they're not, because he's actually posted some things about rejoining her in WWE and things like that, and just telling her, hey, it's only 6 months or 9 months, because she just had a really, really bad injury. It was a botch in a match against Asuka. And but unfortunately, botches happen, accidents happen, and she's going to be on the shelf for between 6 to 9 months because of this leg injury. But one of the things, speaking, talking about Samoa Joe beating MJF, Maxwell Jacob Friedman, for the AWA World Title, MJF has now been removed from the AEW website. I'd seen this mentioned in other headlines, to see it mentioned on other posts on social media, and I want to check it out for myself. And sure enough, MJF is no longer on the AEW website. So read into that what you will. I don't know, maybe if he's taking a break from wrestling, period, what he may be kind of putting his toe in the water as far as like acting goes. Maybe he's wanting to give that a shot. I don't know. But if it's been brought up to Triple H. Triple H has actually come out and said, no, we are not in any kind of negotiations right now with MJF. He said, we've not been talking to him, so just go ahead and squash his rumors now. But of course, they also kind of said the same thing about CM Punk, and all of a sudden CM Punk showed back up. But a lot of they also said that the day of the pay-per-view, they signed CM Punk that morning. So MJF, you may see him show up on a WWE ring. You may see him show up in a TNA ring. You may see him show up in New Japan. New Japan, it seems like a lot of people going there because the man formerly known as Dolph Ziggler, he has now shown up in New Japan. New Japan are actually throwing themselves more into an international look because people who follow wrestling for a while know New Japan. I mean, it is one of the places that you just go if you really want to find out where you stand. Go to New Japan because if you can get those fans behind you, because of what they, if you can wrestle that kind of style and get over there, you can do well pretty much anywhere. You know, especially when you come from America doing it, or Europe and go there and do it because the strong style in Japan is just something to watch because storylines, good guys, bad guys, you don't necessarily see it over there. I mean, and the wrestling is just stiff and it's a great product to watch. But seeing MJF gone, part of it because MJF and not Dolph Ziggler, but his brother, it was Nick Nemeth. They were both in the movie The Iron Claw. And that is a movie, and this will be one of the last things before I call this a day. But the movie The Iron Claw, and by the way, hey Kyle, you'll think this is funny. My friend Kyle, former co-host, you're texting me as I'm recording this. So if anybody can hear these sounds of Megadeth, Almost Honest, that is my text tone. It's actually going off my phone. I don't know how close it is to the microphone if you can hear it. But I'm actually literally talking about the Iron Claw movie. Kyle is texting me about the Iron Claw movie. You know, so that's kind of a funny coincidence. But the Iron Claw movie, my daughter and I actually just went and watched this a few days ago. The Iron Claw movie, it's good, especially if you are a longtime wrestling fan, an old school wrestling fan like myself, and you know the story of the Von Erichs. You already know going in that the movie's going to be sad because you know the family history. And this is a movie that honestly could have been done very easily, could have been done as a 3.5 hour long movie, or made into an actual miniseries, like on a Netflix or something like that. Just because there's so much of the story that they left out. And because if you know the Von Erich story, you know that there were five of them who were wrestlers, not just four. They left the youngest one, Chris, out for reasons that I'm still not clear on. Maybe it's just a decision of the movie makers. But Kevin Von Erich actually greenlighted everything about the movie, so he would have to have greenlighted this. And but MJF, he plays the part of Lance Von Erich. And Lance Von Erich, of course, if you know the story, Lance Von Erich, he was a pretend Von Erich. He was he was supposed to be their cousin. And he had the big head and he tried to get more money. And that's when Fritz Von Erich said, no, you're done. You're not getting more money out of us. And then he went on TV and said, yeah, that guy's not a Von Erich. We were doing him a favor. But it was one of the few times back in the 80s that kayfabe was broken because Fritz said, no, he is not a Von Erich. And yeah, but MJF, I mean, his part, he was only on screen 5 seconds, 10 seconds, not very long. But he's got a little bit of acting bug. I don't know, but I could definitely see a review of Iron Claw in the future, maybe in the very near future, because it's funny enough, that's what Kyle's actually texted me about. So stay tuned for that. But I'm definitely looking forward to this year in wrestling because we're going on WrestleMania 40 for one thing. By the way, it's the 40th WrestleMania before they start saying the 40th anniversary. No, it's the 40th WrestleMania because they did that for the 20th. They kept saying it's the 20th anniversary. No, it's the 20th one. You know, I mean, it's not the anniversary. It's or the you're off by a number. But hopefully they don't do that, and it should be hopefully a good year in wrestling because the industry itself is growing. Been a lot of changes, a lot of positive changes. Don't know what's going to happen with AEW. Hopefully they can whatever this funk that they're in, they can kind of pull themselves back out of it, get things back focused. I mean, I can tell you my suggestions on some things that need to change, and this is why the show is called Armchair Booking, because we're not involved, but we can sit here in our armchairs and throw out any kind of suggestions, but we're still not there on the inside. Hopefully, we'll have more interviews for you. Hopefully, we should have um, a lot of people returning. Maybe we can get uh, other really big names on, because we've had Zabesco, we've had Wildcat Chris Harris twice, and to me, I mean, he's such a good dude. I mean, we love having him on the show. A couple years ago, we had Buff Bagwell on the show, and we've trying to get more. But now I will say that um, those wrestlers are usually not cheap. I'm not going to tell you how much we paid for Zabesco and Bagwell, but those were on the cheaper side of things. There was another wrestler in particular who I also met at the last Fan Fest who wanted to charge $300 for the first half hour, $400 for the first hour, thinking, "Hey, I'll give you a bargain." And I'm like, "Dude, you're famous. You're very famous. You ain't that famous. I'm not paying that much." And if anybody wants to contact me and find out who it was, just let me know, and I'll tell you. I'm not going to tell you on air who it was, but I'll tell you off air. But I hope everybody so far in the first 4 days of the new year. I hope everybody's had a good year so far. And hopefully we make it a good year. Hopefully, hopefully I find a job. That's actually something else, because I'm actually recording this in the middle of the day. And hopefully I can find good work, which will also allow me to go to some more of these Fan Fest, because there's one happening in March. I don't know if I'll be able to go to it, and it's a financial thing. It's not a burnout thing. Although I will say I've already seen the roster of wrestlers, and I've met almost every single one of them already. Not that that's a bad thing, but it kind of keeps me from going back. I'm like, well, I'm going to go pay this money to get in, and then pay to do this and interact with them. And, um, but we'll have to see how that goes. But in the meantime, and just kind of stay tuned, and we'll figure out things as they're going along. But until then, just got to say good day and God bless.